Okay. Cool. Yeah. Hey, everybody. I'm 40 seconds ahead of you. My name is Chris Bourassa. I'm the artist and creative director for Darkest Dungeon. We're like a gothic RPG roguelike. We're kickstarting right now. You can search for us on Kickstarter. And thanks to the Indie Mega Booth people for hosting me. Tonight I was just going to show a little bit of my workflow. And work on a class wallpaper, which is what I usually do in lieu of concept art before working on one of the playable classes. So thought I'd talk briefly about the game from a thematic standpoint, and yeah, then dive right in.
Cool. I'm here too. I'm Kepa from Rocketcat Games. I'm mostly just here to make fun of Chris's workflow.
It's a ludicrous workflow, worthy of the fun being made of it. So that's why it's a great fit. And we might bring Tyler on at some point, so feel free to ask questions about the game if you have anything on your mind. I'll answer the questions 40 seconds after you ask them. Okay. Here we go. So, Darkest Dungeon is, like I said, a gothic roguelike, and kind of the brainchild of me and Tyler. We wanted to try and do a game that focused on like the psychological aspects of adventuring. I'm going to turn down this crazy soundtrack a bit. As opposed to just the gear grind. So, you know, the stress of adventuring would get to your party and kind of mess them up a little bit. And as a player, your job would be to act as a hockey coach kind of thing, or a manager, and deal with them and do your best to get them through these dungeon runs, toughen them up, and eventually take them to the darkest dungeon, from which there is no return. So before starting the project or really getting into much artwork, I tried to pull as much kind of visual DNA from around the internet as I could and craft an art direction for the game. I've been an art director for about 12 years, and I find starting this way helps me shed some of my own presuppositions and gets me a little bit less attached to the project, which I think is important. You need to be a little bit objective, especially when you're starting, because you're trying to find a set of visual rules that reinforce the themes of your game, not just like things you like to do because you like to do them. So basically, we took a lot of cues, you can see, from you know, old Gothic paintings. Uh-oh. I think my computer totally just froze on me. Oh, hang on here. Bear with me. This is my first stream.
Oh, there we go.
Could just be my mouse. Okay, wireless mouse for the win. Yeah, so Gothic architecture was really important. We really wanted to get back to that sort of B-movie Gothica kind of hammer horror, if anybody knows that stuff from back in the 60s and 70s. Mike Mignola, Guy Davis are big comic book influences on me. So you can see a lot of that in kind of the work. Like I'm trying to emphasize those big heavy black shadows and you know, the tone, especially of the marquee. Some of Guy Davis's strongest work, as far as I'm concerned. Viktor Kalbachev is another big influence. I worked with him at Backbone for a little while, and he kind of blew my mind. Yeah, and miniatures were another one that we looked at. Miniatures really iconify shape really well, and we knew that we wanted this sort of pulled back 2D camera, so I had to educate myself on what kind of shapes worked well. So I will move this aside, and you will see that in 40 seconds.
I love those old woodcuts.
Yeah.
Like, what are they? Alchemist woodcuts in a lot of cases?
Yeah, they're really unsettling, and they would just, like, I don't know who draws this stuff, like, just devils eating children, you know, people hanging each other in the town square.
Really bored monks, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Apparently monks would get kind of like stoned from all the time spent with the old rotting parchment, so that's, they attribute some of their visions of, you know, God and stuff to, like, basically tripping balls in the abbey. Anyway, substance abuse aside, tonight we're going to talk about the Jester. So again, just like I do with the game, I take a look at a bunch of artwork and try and pull some kind of inspiration. So for our classes, we were really trying to stay kind of left of center. We, instead of a fighter, thief, mage, whatever, we've gone ahead with kind of a bit of a different take. We've got like a highwayman, a Hellion instead of a straight up barbarian. So for our Jester, I wanted to do something a little bit. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit here. Wanted to do something a little bit different too. And Jesters are pretty silly and comical, and some of them, even though, you know, maybe they're trying really hard to be badasses, they're not. So for me, the challenge is to make something that fits our universe, that's kind of a little bit haunted and a little bit psycho, I guess. Because let's face it, somebody who seeks out a life of adventure is probably a little unbalanced. So I pulled a bunch of this photo reference. I'm trying to go slowly to account for the 40-second delay. So, you know, at first I get these kind of really ridiculous Harlequin costumes. Then I started remembering The Crow. I watched that movie back when I was but a lad and thought it was super cool, and watched it again a couple of years ago and kind of felt like maybe it wasn't as cool as I had remembered it.
Yeah.
But, you know, as far as like a weird psycho Jester kind of character, The Crow kind of lands for me a little bit. I also really like this idea of, you know, he's masked, or at least has face paint on, and so that brought me to Rorschach and obviously the comedian from The Watchmen, or Watchmen, I guess. So I sort of felt like for our game, a Jester or a bard, you know, he'd have a lute, he'd soothe the party with his songs, but they should be kind of haunting, troubled melodies, because after all, we're talking about someone who makes a living by, you know, traipsing around in caves and horrible places, killing things, and then collecting, you know, reward money, essentially. So that's kind of where I started thematically, I guess. Rorschach, comedian, The Crow, plus Gothic. Now, here's something I prepared earlier. To try and sort of save everyone the pain of watching me make 1,000 mistakes, I started with a rough sketch earlier today. The thing that kind of stood out for me was I thought it was really neat to take the stuffing out of the hat. Hang on here. Is the Jester meant to scare your party or make them laugh? Well, yeah, I mean, he can probably do either. I kind of think of him as a bit like a little bit of Joker, a little bit of that kind of darkened edge. I mean, obviously, Tyler Sigman, who's the game designer on the project, is going to have a lot to say about his abilities, and we might massage the design a little bit from there. But I thought it really told an interesting story to take the stuffing out of his hat, and kind of it says everything to me in a single prop, basically. Instead of a big, spunky, silly hat, it's ripped out. Maybe he even just found it. He was just a stone-cold killer who found the Jester hat and decided to adopt that identity. So I try and give the guys just a little bit of a backstory, I guess. You know, nothing fan-fiction-y or super involved, but just enough so that I understand a little bit more about kind of what makes them tick. In keeping with the game's themes, I wanted to give him like kind of an unconventional weapon. So I thought the sickle was vicious and unnecessarily cruel, which I thought played nicely, both in terms of shape and intent. With the loot on his back, they're both rounded curves, but one is meant for an entirely different purpose than the other, and I sort of felt like that was an interesting balance. The hat looks like Cthulhu tentacles on your head. Yeah, I was trying for the dreadlocks kind of vibe. So anyway, I will talk less and draw more as we go. And it looks like Tyler's actually ready to come in, so let's try this.
Trying to add him without closing it?
Without killing you. Let's see here. Invite to group call.
Kind of look like it's working.
It looks like it's trying really hard to work. Okay, well, we'll see how that goes. So yeah, okay. If there's any artists out there, feel free to shoot me questions about brushes and Photoshop stuff and everything. If there's anybody who just wants to ask about the game, that's totally cool. We can just basically shoot the shit for an hour or so, and yeah. So after I do this like real hacky kind of, this is an example of one of the more finished line arts here. Sorry. This is the Hound Master. So that's kind of the level that I take the line art to. Is my voice 40 seconds behind or just the picture?
I think it just might be 40 seconds behind from me, actually.
Oh, okay. Cool.
For anyone on the call.
Okay. So yeah, that's kind of the Hound Master. That's the level of fidelity that I aim for the artwork, and try and keep it nice and consistent. So you can see this one is a lot hackier where it's at. I work in really big brushes and big chunky strokes just to try and keep things simple for myself. Question. How do you think oh my god. From Hateful Chris days. Who are you?
He's the Xantar.
Yeah, that's amazing. My first game was called Hateful Chris. I did it back when I was in school, when no one was doing games in school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like, wow, okay. How do you think it's remained the same in other ways that we can see in DD? Yeah, I think I've always really liked comic book art, but the industry turned me into a digital painter. So, I don't know if Tyler's on here or not. It says he is, but... Impet's nephew. Oh, nice. Yeah, so basically, Hateful Chris was like this really kind of cuter style, but still had the heavy inks, and that's kind of where I started. So it's interesting that I'm almost, well, I hope I'm not ending up here, but that I'm coming back to it. The demand for painting is really, really high in the industry, so I kind of had to teach myself to digital paint, and then now coming back to this, I have to unteach myself that, and I find that it's changed my workflow. Like, I'm a lot more willing to work abstractly and with big chunky stuff, as opposed to like, here, I'll give you an example. You know, back in the day, I would have drawn it like a comic book, right? You know, like I would have done my basic shapes, and once the video catches up, you can kind of see what I'm doing. So I would have probably treated it a lot more like this back in the day, and then actually worked out and measured things, placed the eyes properly. We're really stressed about the anatomy, and you know, it probably would have been a lot slower. But because I'm become kind of more of a painter, I got real hacky with my brushes, and shape kind of mattered more to me than the specifics of anatomy after I learned where all the muscles go and stuff. So now I find I work a lot more based on just the shape and value of things, especially on this project, because it's very forgiving for that kind of work. Having said that, yeah, so what I do after this is I usually like to go in and box out the character. For the Wallpaper series, I've tried to keep it all on black and give a lot of black space around the character so that it kind of feels like they're sort of lost and alone. And doing this kind of helps me see where things need adjusting, because I kind of get a better sense of how they sit in the space of the canvas. If that makes sense. Gameplay-wise, I'm assuming the Jester's special killing. Yes. Yeah, I think that's definitely where we're headed. I mean, part of the thing too. Sorry, I'm answering the Blue Mage and Tilthul. Just bear with me one sec. Just trying to get Tyler in here. To group call, fool. So yeah, Blue Mage and Tilthul. Yeah, we're working on this game. Like, it's very much in progress. So for instance, this character hasn't been built into the game. Tyler hasn't really started beyond like a brainstorm with me. Hasn't really started to sort of spec out their skills, but that's loosely where we're going with them. He can probably hold his own decently in combat, but he's wearing light armor. He's got a couple little knives and a sickle or whatever. His real strength is definitely around the campfire. He'll bust out the loot, play a haunting melody, maybe charm people, debuff enemies. That stuff might be cool. And that's what I love about where we're at, is that it's still pretty fluid. We still have a lot of options, and we can do a lot of exploration. We're not quite so locked in, and because there's only there's only 4 of us in a room, things can change and evolve, and we don't have to run it up to committees and wait for exec reviews and that kind of thing, which happens in larger studios.
Are there any other support characters right now that you think might end up being support characters?
Yeah, we've sort of hinted at a few. We've mentioned some examples of like a grave robber who's a female character. That would do really well in exploration. So you're marching around the hallway side view, and if you put your Crusader up front, like, he'll make maybe more noise and attract more ambushes. But when you do get in a fight, there's your Crusader wearing plate mail right up front. Alternatively, you might want to roll with somebody like this, the Tomb Robber or the Grave Robber up front, disarming traps, avoiding things, being more quiet, reducing the chance of ambush. But in the event you get into a fight, you have like a woman in a cloak right up front waiting to get hit in the face with an axe or something.
Right.
Red.
So would she be more stealthy? Would she avoid fights? Would she be like a scavenger type? I guess it's not set in stone, but...
It's not set in stone, but that's generally what we're looking at,
Right, yeah.
Like, our game, we're really trying to... Combat is important, there's no doubt about it, and I'm really proud of our combat system. I think it's going to be something really cool and special. But we don't judge a character entirely by virtue of their effectiveness in combat. There's a lot more to the game. Camping is important. Like the Crusader, he's okay at camping. He's not terrible, but he's the guy you want taking the big hits, knocking people around with the giant sword. Mighty 1100 approved. Perfect. Yeah. He's got a little bit of that Darksiders thing going on. Maybe I should rethink that before Joe Mad sends me an email. Well, you know what? I would love for Joe Mad to send me an email, so I'll leave it alone for right now. I'm trying for the crow thing, the Rorschach thing, but if it ends up a little too close to death, then yeah, I don't really want to look like I'm lifting from other people's cool ideas. Sounds like Chris isn't set. Oh. No, haha, yeah, that's right. I'm totally not set to do not disturb. I love being disturbed. So anyway, yeah, to pick it up, we sort of measure characters' effectiveness 3 ways. There's combat, there's exploration, and there's camping. So, for instance, the Jester is sort of singled out right now as being most effective at camping. I don't know what Tyler has in mind for his usefulness, in exploration, where you're kind of stomping around the halls, and he'll probably be okay at combat. That's kind of where we're at with this guy. So now I can kind of see. I like to zoom out. I can kind of see what's working and what's not. It feels like maybe things are a bit confused. I'll use a different color here. I think, having been an art director for a while, I have developed a thing where I try to audit my own stuff objectively. So, this is an area of confusion here. There's way too much ghosting and white space happening around this area. You can't tell, but that's a loot. I like this leg, and I like the overall, the overall gesture.
This is desynced.
Oh, there you go. It's Tyler.
Oh, you can hear me now.
Yeah.
I've been on, but I had to reset my mic. I guess that worked.
Okay.
Oh, hey. How's it going?
Hey, Kepa, how are you?
Pretty good. We met just a little while ago, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. That's cool. So you run the Twitch channel, eh?
No, I don't run it. I'm just helping out.
Okay, cool.
I just met him this afternoon. He's like, "I'll come on." I was like, "All right."
Yeah,
I just saw your Death Road to Canada update today, actually.
Oh, nice. Yeah, the live action trailer with the dog.
Yes, it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, we have kind of similar games, I guess. It's pretty much a morale-based, randomly generated narrative, isn't it?
Yeah, basically good people getting into bad situations. Actually, no, bad people getting into bad situations. I think
Yeah, there we go.
No fun of it.
Yeah, I've been trying to explain this guy as kind of not maybe the nicest guy in the world, but he's like a hipster Jester. He's like ironically there for fun. You know? I love fun or whatever.
Yeah, or whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, some people are
I
asking Tyler, like, they're asking, like, kind of what his specialty will be, and there's some sort of presuppositions that, you know, he's a camping expert. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely camping's a big thing. I think throughout development of the game, we've talked a lot about, the bard, and finally the bard matters to the party, aside from sort of the D&D sense, like the actual bard. And so when we kind of tweaked it to a Jester, I mean, we still want him to fill that role, which is, he's got the musical instruments, so there's certainly an advantage to sitting around the campfire and breaking out the lute and strumming. But I think that, the fact that he's super, I guess, I don't know, that not exceptionally funny, but yet still the things he does could still provide some levity. I mean, if you look back in history, to some degree, I don't think the Jesters were all that happy and funny. They make a lot of jokes and at other people's expense, and so I think that he can still fulfill that role. I mean, heck, people, hundreds of years ago would watch public executions for fun and torturing and things like that. So given that we're really based in this kind of gritty, old Europe sort of feel, I mean, I think he fits right in, and so his ability to raise the spirits of the rest of the party are definitely important. I can see him being more of a camping specialist than a combat specialist, but it's nice that he's going to have some abilities for sure that can get the job done. And I think your hook there kind of shows, or the scythe or whatever it is.
Yeah, I actually read somewhere that Jesters were sometimes just prisoners, like it was their punishment. And so if they like messed up and told the joke or something that the king didn't like, or they didn't make him laugh, they would just get put to death anyway. So they're these guys dressed up as clowns having to be funny or they die.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool. Terrible, but cool.
Well, people these days complain about, or not complain, but it's nerve-wracking to do, say, the people go to the comedy courses or whatever, and it culminates in them doing stand-up. So yeah, it'd be a lot more pressure if you're not funny, if you're just cold from the herd immediately. I don't know. I think that he's got a cool role to fill for sure.
So are you thinking he'll be the guy for camp support, or will he be other classes that also specialize in that?
Well, all the classes, one of the things we're doing right now, of course, is subject to change, but there's kind of a general pool of camping abilities that most classes can train, and then each class has a couple of camping skills that are unique to the class. And so, for example, this guys are going to be pretty powerful in comparison to maybe, say, a class that has more power on the combat side.
I use the Crusader as an example.
Yeah, Crusader might not have as much they can do around the campsite in terms of pure effectiveness. I mean, there's always going to be things that are useful in certain situations, but I mean, I think just thematically, breaking out the loot could raise everyone's spirits pretty well, whereas so that sort of thing. I mean, we're not trying to achieve pure balance. That's something we talk about a lot where, if you were to break it down and say, this guy's has a power of 3 in combat, but only 1 in camping because we've got to keep a total power of 4. We're not doing anything like that. But certainly I think the bard or the Jester role is really inherently tied to other people. Without an audience, the Jester doesn't have as much of a purpose. So just to that regard, I think his interaction with the rest of the group is really important.
Yeah, anybody who dresses up like this and then just plays a lute alone is maybe needs some work. I'm trying to think of a euphemism, but I can't. I think they're batshit, actually.
Well, you have to be drawing at the same time, then, so that's hard to think.
I know I've noticed my skill at metaphors and anecdotes is greatly diminished when I'm using this part of my brain to draw. I can be quite colorful in conversation, but I feel like I've got kryptonite on me right now.
That's
So
okay.
the
just
characters
draw.
in this game, it's all puppet animation, right?
Yeah, we're using a software called Spine, which has been really good. It's by Esoteric Software. They actually ran a Kickstarter to do Spine, and then a second.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I can't complain. I mean, I'm not an animator, and I've hardly really used it. We got somebody to do the animation for us, but they raved about it, and the results, I think, work really well. When Tyler and I initially conceived of the game, we were going to shoot the characters from sort of almost the waist up in combat and just sort of bobble them around when they were walking, but that quickly proved to just not carry as much weight. You know, it just didn't land, it didn't feel polished, it didn't feel cool. So I think having them, you know, sort of hustle down the hallway adds a lot of life.
Oh cool, I didn't know it was Spine. That's very interesting.
Yeah. When camping, Kojopo asks, will you have like someone being a sentry? And oh yeah, that's a cool question. Yeah, that's camping skills. So you might be able to say, tell your highwayman like, no, you don't sleep tonight. You don't get any rest. I accept that you're going to wake up tired and with lower health than everybody else, but you set up a sentry, or you take first watch, or whatever you want to call it, and your ambush chance kind of goes down. So those are like, that would be an example of maybe like what Tyler was saying, like a camping skill specific to that class.
Yeah.
We're not committed to that particular skill, but that type of thing is definitely what we're doing.
Yeah, and sorry if I just missed this, but the Houndmaster is a great example where his
Right.
hound, we've got a skill where the hound can keep watch, and so I think that's really neat. So there would be a benefit to reducing ambush chance, or giving you maybe a leg up if you do get ambushed and that sort of thing.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about like if you get ambushed while you're sleeping, you wake up and your party order is all messed up. So it's like they scrambled up, grabbed their weapons, and you're like, oh shit, my healer's like right up in front, you know?
I loved Ultima for that. You know, Ultima, I think 4 and 5 had that sort of thing where they actually showed you sleeping and played music, and you know, it was so thematic. You know, and then yeah, when you got ambushed, sometimes only one person would be awake and the other guys would still be in their sleeping pose.
Oh yeah,
and
you're right.
like,
I remember that.
You're like, shit, get up, get up, get up. You know, the orcs are charging, so something like that would be pretty cool. Where make it so, okay, yeah, you sacrificed. And the way camping skills work, I should say, is you've got a limited number of action points to spend, and so you kind of, okay, I've got a pool of 10 points, and I'm going to spend them on skills. So you can't have everybody doing each of their skills every time. So it's tactical camping basically. So if you're kind of just in a position where you're like, we cannot afford to be jumped here in the middle of sleeping, then maybe put the hound on watch or send the highwayman out, and he doesn't get as much rest benefit, but then you're better protected.
Yeah, you can actually even do cool stuff. we're game designing now, but like you could do cool stuff where you heal up the highwayman with all the bandage skills, so he's in pretty good shape, and you tell him he's not getting any rest, so that everybody else gets the rested benefit, but you know, he had all the food or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things we really enjoy, I guess, is, you know, anyone else out there who's a game developer as well, is it's really fun to brainstorm stuff, and when it's easy to brainstorm ideas, then you know you've got a decent core idea. And we find, like, yeah, with the camping and combat, we're just constantly thinking of new things, and sometimes you have like a system and it's hard to think of new things for, and then you get kind of dead-ended, and that's certainly happened to me on games I've worked on in the past. And this one is like the opposite problem. It's more trying to capture all the ideas that pop out, and you know, we've been watching the comments on our Kickstarter, and that's been really fun, and people are brainstorming ideas, and you know, half of them you're like, oh man, we really should do that, but there's just no way to do it all. But I like that problem. It's a cool problem to have.
Any artists out there, sometimes, well, all the time, I always flip, and then spend a little bit of time working with the image flipped horizontally, just to check sometimes it makes your mistakes pop out. In this case, I realize now, like looking at this, that this whole area is in a lot of trouble. Like I can't tell where his hand starts. and his dagger is where, and it's really confusing in there, so I'm going to have to make sure I go in and tidy that up. That's one of the really cool things about working this way that I feel like it's taught me as an artist, is that cleanliness and iconification are really, really integral, and sometimes just complexity for its own sake just leads to a confused read on the image, which you want to avoid at absolutely all costs. Especially for something like this, where what I'm trying to sell you on is not actually this picture. I'm trying to sell you on the sprite. So I want you to see this picture and then look at the tiny little guy and be like, oh yeah, it's the same guy. And if I can do that, then I've done my job. That's why shapes are really important, like big shapes, because they read when the guys are small. Tilthul wants to know if the afflictions are class specific. You should talk about that, Tyler.
Sure. Okay. Not class specific really at this point, although there may be some weighting towards it. So I guess that's something actually that occurred to me recently about doing the weighting. For example, the Hellions are a real good candidate for maybe being an overt tendency to being abusive. But we're kind of trying to strike a balance a little bit of the characters develop as you adventure. So they sort of come in with specialties based on what their class is, but really we're kind of making the assumption and trying to push the idea that like every crusader is not the same and every highwayman is not the same. So you might have a highwayman who's really prone to depression, and your next highwayman might be greedy, and stuff like that. So we're trying to keep some of those things a little bit mutable so that there's just kind of more interesting ways that even the classes themselves can go, because I think that opens a lot of interesting, not just narrative, but gameplay possibility, like the like the highwayman who's got a heart of gold, or the the crusader who's just afraid of everything, and so he's got all these inspirational speeches, but he's just terrified of his own shadow. So at this point, we're kind of looking more towards that being like they can develop either way. But I do think it might be fun to put a little bit of predisposition in there. So okay, they might be inclined to go this way, but they won't necessarily go that way. That's something we're still, probably the play testing will really determine how far we push that.
Tilthul's question makes me wonder, can the Houndmaster's dog die?
No.
They'll share how far.
Yeah, the Houndmaster and his dog are basically going to be a combined item, if you will.
Okay, yeah,
so
makes sense.
There's not going to be a whole bunch of like, okay, the pet is separate and the pet's doing this and you're doing that. They're really a unit, but it allows us to do some pretty cool stuff. Like in combat, he'll have moves where he sends the hound out, and for that attack, you'll see the hound like leap forward and make an attack, and then leap back, basically.
So I'm trying to go in and clean up a lot of these, like it's called ghosting when you're working on black okay, so here's, I want to draw this this square or whatever, or this cube, and I want it to be like a white cube on black. I don't know if people are hearing my voice about the cube before they can actually see me draw it, but hopefully it's not too bad. So you're like, I want to draw this white cube, but I'm worried about the edges getting lost because it's on black. Ghosting is when you go around the outside of it so that you can see your black line edges of the white cube. And it doesn't look good if you do it everywhere. You should really only do those sort of like rimlet edges where the lighting actually makes sense. So these guys are all rimlet and then they have a key light on them. So I'm going through and erasing and painting over in black a lot of the spots where I had like the extra ghosting that I didn't need.
I can answer that one.
Sure, yeah.
Sleep deprived Joel. That's cool. I think to me that's a matter of a balance problem when that happens. Where there's certainly a strategic advantage to just killing the enemy, as opposed to playing the treadmill of. But I think that's to some degree how you balance. Like if your high damaging attacks are basically so damaging that it never pays to stun or whatever, because there's another benefit to stunning, which is, keeping them from doing their attack whilst you're doing damage. So if you have the opportunity to kill in one turn, no question. but it also might be an issue where it's not actually your choice. So, I mean, if you have enough high damage dealing characters to go in, then that's going to kind of dictate your strategy, perhaps. But some characters just don't have that damage potential. So depending on how you structure your party for other reasons, then it's going to guide your hand in combat. But yeah, to me, it's more of a balance issue where, like even in playtesting right now, there's a huge advantage. Like some of the enemies, like there's this big gnarly skeleton captain guy we have. And if you let him get a turn, I mean, he can do damage to everybody at the same time, and it's really nasty. So you really can't kill him in one turn, or even maybe 2 turns. So it really pays to, for example, have somebody controlling him and trying to keep the stun on while the other guys are doing as much damage as they humanly can. And then now you start pairing that guy with other enemies, and you've got problems on your hands. So we definitely, I think the key to any sort of turn-based tactical thing is you push the balances so that there's always a reason to do those other actions. And when there's never a reason to do it, it's because your balance is out of whack. I guess I said the same thing 3 times, but I hope that answers your question.
I think the key takeaway is that if it's not fun, it's Tyler's fault. I think that's what we all need to bear in mind. You know, even years from now, when you're looking back on this, you're just sort of watching this Twitch stream with your grandkids. You know, that's what we need to take away.
Yeah, and another cool thing in the mechanics is the resistances, and kind of that plays in too. So, I mean, if you've got a big enemy like that is exceptionally resistant to a certain type of attack, whether it's damage over time or stunning or debuffing, then that's also going to guide your hand a little bit. And that's kind of knobs and dials that we can play with on the design side to be like, hey, if you find out that this big gnarly guy is really susceptible to stun, then even better to be stunning him can be, because you don't run the risk of maybe trying a stun and it not working, and then you're like, oh man, the game theory says I should have just done the damage to him. So with all those dials and the tunability, you can definitely make it so that the different actions have their value.
Yeah, I said it earlier when I started. I don't know how many people were actually watching at that point, but I'm pretty excited about our combat, just because I think there's so many different types of enemies, and like we've got these little maggots that, you know, they don't do a whole lot of damage, but they just chew through your stress. So, because it's gross to have like a 4-foot tall maggot jump at you, you know, it freaks you out, and maybe it can't really do much, but you know, titter at you or whatever. But because all characters have the stress and the health kind of going at the same time, we have a lot of opportunity to do some pretty creative and interesting things.
Man, what's worse though, letting that maggot crawl over you, or actually, you know, killing the maggot so it explodes?
Well, yeah, exactly. Those are the questions you'll have to ask in the darkest dungeon.
Yeah, the maggots are weird. I mean, I think maggots alone are weird, or like stressful.
I was
maggot.
living in this house in Australia when I lived there for about a year. I was camping and surfing and doing the whole thing after university, and we got maggots because we were disgusting people at that time in our lives. And they were crawling out of the garbage can, and my friend had a can of Raid, and there was about 50 of them all across the kitchen floor, and then he sprays them with the Raid, and they just kind of rolled on their backs, vibrated, rolled back on their fronts, and kept walking. It was the scariest, most nauseating thing I've ever seen.
Walking it off.
Yeah, they just shook it off, these little things. They're like, I'm gonna be a fly, you can't stop me!
Oh, that's just weird.
Yeah, life. How
Should I answer?
will it say to be introduce a new class long after the others? Yeah, go for it. I'm gonna keep working.
I know I feel bad talking so much about, but I like answering the questions. So yeah, balance is really interesting on Darkest Dungeon. First of all, we're not a multiplayer game, so this frees us up from a lot of constraints that unfortunately you just dictate everything you do about multiplayer games. This allows us to be a lot more creative. It allows us to have classes that aren't balanced. Not that this is the intent exactly, but we consciously are acknowledging that some of the classes probably won't be completely balanced, and that's intentional. That's intentional because we have mechanisms in the game where the way the meta goal is, and we haven't really talked about this yet, there's still going to be a reason why you're going to want to use a class that maybe could be considered inferior to another class, just for purposes of achieving the grand goal of the game. But the balance is a little different than, say, just the design. So, for example, the Lord is a high backing tier in our game where they get to collaborate with us on a class design. Ultimately, the knobs and dials on exactly how powerful each skill is are still going to be controlled by us. So, for example, we'll work with the Lord on something like, okay, if it's a combat specialist or a frontline specialist, and we want them to have a super damaging attack, that's all stuff that the Lord's going to be able to kind of work with us on. But tuning that is exactly how damaging that attack is something that we'll be doing throughout early access, and maybe even periodic updates after release. And so that's something that is, we get a lot of playtest data. We kind of see how things are going. We do a lot of spreadsheet analysis and things on the front side. But
you mean you do? I never look at spreadsheets.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is balance is sometimes a bit different than even design. And then introducing other classes later, we're going to kind of have an approach, pretty well figured out by then. And by the time we've done a lot of classes, adding other ones is going to be fairly simple in terms of kind of making judgments on how powerful to make the abilities or what they do. It'll be kind of fun when we add, say, like a new status effect or all new ability that maybe. Yeah, and then that might take a little bit of experimentation, but we're going to let theme guide a lot on that. If there's an ability that a character should have, like with the bounty hunter is crowd control, it's often hard to exactly equate, like, okay, how much do we equate the ability to pull an enemy 2 spaces forward with, the Crusader's damage bonus on a Zealous Accusation or something. And those are things that you just kind of try to take stabs at, and then make sure that ultimately there has to be a reason you want to use each class. And that's our bigger goal than maybe making sure that every class equates in the universe exactly right. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, I think for me too, like one of my favorite things about working with Tyler on the game is that we both kind of think about theme first. Like the bounty hunter came out of a cool theme idea, not necessarily out of a need to fill a role. And I think that's been really fun to, because I do believe we have a pretty strong like sense of what our IP is, that we can play it in that kind of that region. We can start with theme first and see if an idea works. That's how the leper came about. It was like, what if we had a leper? And then it was, okay, well now what does he do? What's he good at? And then Tyler's like, well, he doesn't feel anything. Maybe he can take a whole bunch of damage. And then I think Calvin or myself was like, yeah, but then maybe he's really, really hard to heal. And then out of this discussion, the class kind of mechanics were born. And that's really fun to do.
Yeah, and like my general approach to balancing is kind of you go with that first, and then you start twisting the knobs until you've got something that works with all the rest of the game. And there's aesthetic benefits too, to classes. Like if someone's going to want to use it just because it looks cool, or they identify with that thing. And I mean, our mission is to make sure that each class is interesting for people. And there's a few classes, I don't know how much you've talked about this, Chris, that are almost pure support that we've got.
I talked a little bit about the grave robber, but not a whole lot. If you can.
Well, what about like the merchant?
I haven't mentioned that yet.
So we've kind of loosely talked about him in interviews, so I'll just float it out there. But the merchant is crap in combat. He probably has some good camping skills, but probably his single biggest benefit is he's going to increase the gold take that you get on your quests, and that's pretty cool. It's pretty orthogonal balancing if you want to think of it that way. Like how much is an increased gold take worth in terms of lack of combat skills, or maybe just complete unpreparedness for going down there and fighting stuff. Maybe we'll make him even more susceptible to stress and things like that. And now it's also a handicapping thing that an expert can use. They can go in and say, I'm going to carry this dead weight and see how far I can get, and maybe I'll benefit in the end. Maybe a little bit like the Splunker class in Rogue Legacy or something like that.
Yeah, I think
merchants, one leper.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What a cheery crew that would be.
And let's not underestimate the value also of seeing some Let's Players out there. Send four merchants down in and just see how far they can get. And
Totally. The other thing I think is going to be really cool, definitely our vision for what could be cool is, different times in the game in your campaign, you're going to need different things. You might be in a situation where you've got too many new characters and need to just do some easy missions to toughen them up. You might be in a situation where your coffers are running low and you'll need money, and in that case, yeah, by all means, do a merchant run. Keep them alive, get a ton of gold, and so your position in the overall metagame will sometimes determine maybe the best course of action for you, and the party makeup should switch to reflect that. So I think that's another strength of having classes that aren't necessarily strictly balanced, is that there'll be a time for each one of them to kind of shine, and that just happens by virtue of what their skills are, as opposed to some sort of like arbitrary spreadsheet number that needs to add up at the end of the day.
Yeah, that sounds great. That's a good way to prevent a min-max situation where there's a perfect party that you just stick with the entire game.
Yeah, exactly. That's like, we're diametrically opposed to having that happen. Like, I think we maybe, I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, but I think that's a bit of a failure if somebody can just crack our code and be like, well, no, you always do this, you always take these characters, and then there's no more threat. Because our whole game is based around the fact that you're going to be facing these really tough decisions that have permanent consequences. So if you can game the system to that level, I'm not saying little tips and tricks, won't pop up, but if you can just beat us at our own game like that, we made them.
Yeah, and on that note, I think some people have asked, like in the comments of the Kickstarter, like, can I bring 4 Crusaders down? And that's something that we have to figure out through playing. But that's really a question of, if you can duplicate classes, will it break the game? And what I'm hoping is that it's going to be a little bit self-balancing because of our kind of rank structure, and also the fact that characters are good at different things. I think it'll hopefully be a little bit self-balancing in terms of, if you bring 4 Crusaders down, great. You're very hard to kill, but I mean, the 2 in back are fighting at like very reduced effectiveness because most of their skills are front rank skills. So there might be things like, okay, you bring 2 Crusaders and 2 Vestals. That's a pretty awesome party. But my attitude towards what I guess you'd consider exploits as well has always been, first of all, like, if someone can create a very effective party that way, that's kind of cool. You don't necessarily want to take that away. It's only when it really breaks the game that you want to nerf it. And so I think that, yeah, for sure. But I think you'll naturally want to have, okay, I need the Crusader for this, and maybe the Barbarian or the Hellion, and then I kind of need the Vestal, and I'm going to take a Merchant because I need gold. I think that's going to be the more natural thing that happens.
Yeah, for sure. We got about 15 minutes left.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I can keep going if there's interest. It's no problem. But I thought it would be cool. Like, this is getting a little tighter. There's the Handmaster. There's the Jester. I've tightened it up a little bit, so I think I could go in and sort of show some of the color stuff. And we could keep taking questions.
Mal Kojin had a question. He was asking if you can get disposable NPCs to go over the 4-person limit.
Not as of yet. It's not a bad idea. But we've always talked about the party as a 4-man thing, give or take a dog.
Yeah, he was talking about hirelings.
Right. I mean, I think you should have enough on your hands with 4 guys who sometimes don't listen to your commands and freak out and are arguing with each other, and you're worried about food and provisions. And like, I think you'll have enough on your hands that having a guy on your payroll as well might, you might not feel that he's missing when you're playing the game. Let me say it that way.
Hey, Chris, do you want to talk through a little bit, like somebody's asking about the coloring? So what's your general process here? Did you talk about that at the beginning, or?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
Once I get kind of like a nice woodcutty vibe going with the black and white, around about this stage, quite frankly, I like to try a color and see what it does, and then double back and tidy up the line art and just do the last little bits of noodly things. So I thought I would do the color. We'll see coloring. I'm about to do it. It's gonna happen right now. So I haven't given any thought to a color palette on this guy whatsoever. So I'm just gonna try some stuff. Generally, the game's pretty gritty, and I like to give things a bit of a brown cast. So I start with a sort of a warm gray, and then try and give it a little bit of form. I don't do a whole lot of painting, but I do want to knock some things back and help some things come forward. So for instance, his hand back here and this dagger aren't nearly as important as his sickle. His leg gets less important as it approaches the edge of the canvas. The loot is going to be primarily in shadow because I don't want it to compete with his arm. Just everything. I mean, I'm painting to help the image read better. That should always be your objective, is clarity of communication. So, for instance, this area up here is a little bit confused because I've got the sickle with some of this ghosting that's happening around his dreadlock Cthulhu tentacle hat. So, you know, I want to knock the hat back and keep the blade in the front. Someone's asking about, can you enter with 2?
You could. There's probably no advantage in that case to going less. It's just you're kind of...
Yeah, because we don't have XP, so you're not going to be splitting 4 people's XP 2 ways. There's actually really no... I mean, I can't think of any game advantage why you would do that.
Yeah, I mean, we do have characters upgrading and kind of leveling up, but it's slightly different than the normal system. But yeah, I think in those cases, aside from just the humor value of making a short-lived buddy movie in the dungeon, you generally want to fill out the party.
It was supposed to be a simple mission. So I'll hit the loot with a little bit of light back there. So I think it's, like I was saying, it's about sort of establishing what your visual priorities are. And so for me on this guy, you know, this is the thought process really, is that I think his hat and face are the most important thing. A, you emote with a face, and B, like I said earlier, I like the story that I think his de-stuffed Jester hat says everything that I need people to take away from this class. The second thing is the sickle. It's kind of an unconventional weapon. It's really vicious and kind of cruel. And like I said earlier, it shares the shape with the loot, which is completely meant for another purpose. So the loot would be number 3. But I don't want to hit the round part of it. I want you to see this because this is unrecognizable. But the little spirally thing with the little tuning knobs and whatnot up there will communicate what it is for me. This other dagger is just there for color. I mean, yeah, he's got a dagger. He's got a matching set. But these are the 3 things. So why did I put a 2 up here? This is a 1. These are the 3 things kind of that I want you to remember about this character, and the fact that he's skinny and all that other stuff.
Someone was asking about the walk animation. Yeah, you could talk a little about that, but all the walks are custom cut up per character.
Yeah, everybody has their own rig. They actually have multiple rigs for everything they do.
So yeah, that's probably a good point, Soldier Morty, how some of the characters, you know, they just don't differ that much in how they're going to walk, but this guy could tiptoe or something weird.
We could go all friggin' Valdo with him if we really wanted to be crazy.
He should prance around.
It'd be really creepy if he was kind of dancy, Johnny Depping his way through the dungeon, you know?
That would be cool, actually.
I just turned Johnny Depp into a verb.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, someone's done that before.
Oh, all right.
It could apply to a lot of things, too. I don't know.
Yeah, it could. Just being awesome is one of them. So yeah, there we can kind of start seeing him. Yeah, it's kind of like a throwing dagger is kind of what I had in the back of my head, just in case, like I'm trying to give Tyler a few, we don't have to stick with this design literally, but it might prompt him to think from a design perspective something might be cool, something might really work. You know,
I think what he's really trying to say is, if he draws it, then I'm forced to design around it.
I passive-aggressively get Tyler to do what I want by drawing it first.
Because then he can do the old...
the art, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I don't have time to redraw this guy. Yeah. We're gonna have to just go with this.
Come on, bro. So yeah. Okay, so I think from a lighting standpoint, he's working. Kind of looks like he's coming out of the dark, which is kind of the motif behind all the sort of wallpapers and posters I've done. Oh, thanks, man. Yeah. So color-wise, I don't know. I kind of feel like a shocking white face would be pretty cool. Probably needs a bit of red on him.
Yeah, I think some of the questions aren't getting posted.
Oh,
weird.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Are you guys considering alternate avatars to break up the monotony of a 4-man single-class party? I'm not quite sure I understand.
Variants. Basically just saying, art-wise, is every Crusader going to look exactly the same? Is every Jester going to look exactly the same?
I don't want that, but that is kind of the way we're headed because, like I said, there's the art team on this game is the person talking to you right now, so we have to be really mindful of scope. The same way we take our obligation to our backers and whatnot very seriously, we have to be realistic about what we're able to achieve, and given where we're at right now, it's the gear isn't going to change the character, and the characters are sort of archetypal.
But the stretch goal of the coloring might be a good thing to talk about.
Yeah. So if we get far enough in, some cold grays here would be cool. If we get far enough into the stretch goal, we're going to offer the ability to sort of tint, trim colors and different things like that, so you can tell them apart visually. I would love to get to a system where, we could, I don't know, provide you 3 or 4 different heads per guy, and then because of the way the spine ring is set up, you can just swap them in. But that is a pipe dream, I think. But you never know. I don't want to say no because I love the idea, but I can't, honestly commit that we're going to do it.
So
maybe
the
an
color
update sort of thing?
What's that?
Maybe an update sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, if the game is a wild success, I'm knocking on my desk right now. If it really takes off and we're in a great position like that, then absolutely, that's those are the first things I want to do. Because I'm the artist and I love having that visual diversity. And in every game I play, like MMOs and whatnot, I love having tons of gear and cool looking stuff. But I kind of come back to the fact that this game, there's 1,001 games out there that do gear better than we'll ever do it, even if that was our goal, was to do a gear grind kind of game. I think
Warsmith was mostly thinking about recolors though, just in case you have a party of 4 people, all of Crusaders, just 4 Crusaders.
Yeah, that's the idea. Thanks for clarifying. I was rambling a bit. But that's the idea. Is if we hit that stretch goal, we'll be able to tweak them out. So you could have you could do cool stuff like break up all your Crusaders, or you could sort of have your A-team party, all use the blacks and gray color palette, or the golden color palette, or whatever you want to do. That would be the idea there. So you could sort of easily differentiate them, and then it might be kind of cool to swap in your B-list guy, and he's got the red shirt, and you're like, well.
Yeah, I'm liking those colors already.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting question. Can you sacrifice one of your guys if you get ambushed to keep the rest of the guys moving? I think you can, as we've designed it now, you can retreat from an ambush, but you can't sort of keep them occupied and then save 3 guys by sacrificing 1, because the whole idea behind our combat system is that those hallways are really cramped, and so you couldn't really get past a guy.
There's maybe a less extreme version, which is some of the character skills can basically be distractions or taunts or defensive buffs, where basically your whole goal is to, hey, attack me, and Crusader has a couple cool things like that. But you could use those to the extent of, hey, I'm a meat shield and I'm going to try to focus all the damage on me. And if you're already wounded, that could basically be a heroic moment where you sacrifice a guy to do that. So sort of indirectly through the skills, that definitely can happen.
That's a good answer.
Tyler, weren't we talking before about if you don't like someone in your party, you can just intentionally get them murdered? Is that still the case?
Yeah, hey, there's nothing to stop you from...
we make no judgments about how you play the game.
And if someone doesn't perform for you at a key moment and you want to punish them however you want to punish them, we encourage that, and maybe there will be a little gravestone with their story on it. So that's all.
It's not a punishment; it's a heroic sacrifice.
That's right. If the character dies, is he gone forever? There is maybe some back door to get your absolute favorite guy back. But generally speaking, yeah, we want, the whole thing about the game is to ask players to think strategically, tactically, and we want your decisions to matter. So yes, if you lead a party into chaos and you bite it, then yeah, you got to live with that. Can I have a kiss? Good night.
What are you drawing?
I'm drawing a Jester.
Which one?
Do you know what it's from? Good night. All right.
For one horrifying moment, I thought you were talking to your cat or something.
No, yeah. That'd be Tyler, actually. Who's he schmooky booky books? I'm like, did you adopt a kid or? No, it's your cat.
Wow.
Oh, I should ask this. What makes the game a roguelike?
Go for it, Tyler.
Haha. Okay, so it's roguelike because it shares a lot of qualities of Rogue, but I mean, it doesn't share every single quality, but... sorry, there's a cat over here. There is a real cat over here, and he's attacking legs, like there's no tomorrow. But anyway, yeah, so for example, you do explore. There's a lot of procedurally generated content, the sorts of challenges that you face in a roguelike in terms of that sort of thing. Instead of, like a typical roguelike is you go until you die and that's it. And that's probably the area where we differ from, we share a lot of things in terms of like permadeath and these other things, but it's permadeath per character and you've got a party and each quest you go on is sort of a, around like a 20-30 minute single level dungeon run. Then you go back to town and then you maintain your guys, then you pick a new quest and go. So that's kind of where we differ, but there's definitely a lot of you go down and explore the level and fight different things and the permadeath things like that. Someone said, randomize. Yeah, there's a few good things here, but Chris, there's one about the art, and then if there's time, I'll hit the other ones. They were saying about no eyes. Notice no characters have eyes.
Yeah, that's cool that somebody picked up on that. Yeah, that's deliberate. I think eyes are, the window to the soul. And I want there to be no hope in the tone of the game. I think that's what makes those heroic reversals much more impactful, is if they come out of nowhere. So I just liked the sort of depressed, shadowed faces, kind of beat down by their experiences. And yeah, so I think like eyes and pupils and glints in their eyes imply like a twinkle and a life and just a whole bunch of good stuff that I don't think belongs in the Darkest Dungeon.
Does it make you identify, like if you did eyes, then do people feel like, oh, these characters are much more identifiable?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas in this case, they're
fact. Yeah, if you have a guy who's like, you draw a character who's looking out at the viewer, they immediately connect. So it's a bit counterintuitive to do it this way, but I sort of thought it just gave everybody this downcast air that the net gain from the tonal consistency was worth sacrificing maybe some of the immediate relatability, and just that it's different. And so I'm glad that somebody picked up on that. It's cool.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a good call. Have you tried different things like giving them, gigantic enemy girl eyes? This is an experiment.
That's one of our unannounced classes, is the Harajuku girl.
Nice.
Her eyes are twice the size of the Jester's head, each one of them. So you're definitely able to know how she feels about everything at all times.
Oh,
new stretch goal.
New stretch goal. And
official news: anime girls in Darkest Dungeon.
Yeah. I don't want to talk about that anymore.
There's too many ways the conversation could go.
That's not what I wanted the takeaway to be.
Probably what Kotaku covers at all the news sites, the only thing from this stream.
Yeah, exactly.
There's some good questions about like other enemies. Yeah, we've got different dungeon environments, and I think a lot of what we've shown so far is from the ruins, which are kind of the crypts or the vaults, or the name changes every month. We're on ruins right now, right?
I think we're on ruins now.
Yeah, we're on ruins. So that naturally has... but even an example there, like it's got skeletons, and I think some of the footage and the things we've released have skeletons, but we sat down, we're like, okay, look, every game does skeletons, no question, they're cool, but we wanted the idea that it's this kind of almost a Poe-like thing of, they're in this great house and maybe even having a party, and then this cataclysm hits, and now you've got guys that are, they're the former guard still dressed up, or there's like the skeleton courtier who's got his fancy hat and his drinking goblet, and maybe whatever ball they were having just ended horribly, and now they've got now they're forever immortalized in that. And yeah, lots of Cthulhu inspired monsters. But the other what I was getting is the different environments are kind of they shape the monsters a lot. So the vaults make sense. A lot of the Walking Dead, but we've got what have we announced? Other environments, I guess you could talk a little bit.
The Weald we've announced.
Yeah, which is basically like a wood, like a corrupted.
Yeah, like a sort of a twisted forest that's like choking out like an ancient gravestone, and there'll be a lot more like hags and wild dogs and Pictish raiders and sort of barbarous people kind of running around in there. So yeah, all the enemies and all the interactive objects are kind of themed to the dungeon location. So we think that's going to keep the adventuring really fresh, because you're kind of cycling back to town every 30 minutes or so. Then you can go off and try any of these different environments, and you can even I'm not going to talk about it, but you can go to the darkest dungeon and try and resolve the game's story the minute you start the game if you want. But it's like going straight to hell, and so give it a try. But it's not going to go well until your guys are ready. So we thought that was just really cool, that it's just everyone knows where this horrible thing is trying to, get access to our world or whatever. It's up the hill. Don't go up the hill. Just don't do it.
Yeah, until you're ready.
Or do it and don't expect a good result. Yeah, so I don't know. I think that's kind of cool. We're trying not to limit you. You can just try all this stuff.
New Game Plus, yeah, there will be probably New Game Plus features. There is an end to the game in the sense of it's not what I'd consider a heavily story-based game. I mean, that's where we are close to roguelike, but we do have a story, and there is a meta goal. And when you complete that goal, our plan right now is to do a New Game Plus, basically. So that's pretty cool. Entire party dies. You maintain a roster. So it's a little more like XCOM. I mean, you are going to have your favorites, and hopefully you'll get attached to those guys, and then when they meet their ends, sometimes you'll be distraught. We want that. But we'll also, you'll invest time in trying to keep them from meeting their ends. But when a character dies, or even a whole party, then you've got other people on your roster that you've recruited and maintained. In fact, one of the parts of the game that's maybe different than a very typical RPG is that you're going to have to mix that roster up. Or the party of four, because you're going to come back from a quest and a dude's going to be peaked at stress and he's going to be freaked out, and if you take him back down again, he's just going to go useless. So you're going to put him in the tavern or the abbey and have him do a little R&R and then swap someone else in for them. So you'll kind of have your A team, but you'll be mixing that up with new recruits and B team and stuff like that. And we've got some things in place, not to belabor it. I'll turn it back over to Chris, but an entire party wipe is rare. When you lose it, you can retreat from combats, you can retreat from the dungeon. So if it's not going your way, you can go back. But you might lose a guy in the doing or two, depending on what's going on. But we've got some things in place so that you don't just get to be a victim of the classic party wipe all the time.
Yeah, I think
one quick question.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Is there any permanent failure state? Like, can the monsters come in and burn your town to the ground or something?
No. Like, the town is sort of the marker of your metagame progress, and it's persistent. Even if you party wipe, 100 times in a row, and you're just a shitty player, any upgrades you put into your town remain there on your it's like your account progress, basically.
All right, makes sense.
Yeah, we're trying to be tough. I think this is the big thing that maybe we can wrap up. I don't know how long the Indie Mega Booth wants us jacking their channel, but. The key takeaway is we're trying to make a challenging game that tests people's, awareness and strategic thought processes and all that stuff. And it's going to be tough, and you're going to lose guys, and you're going to roll your eyes and pull your hair out sometimes in a good way. But we're not setting out to make a game that's just difficult for its own sake. We're just trying to set up these really interesting organic problems that can arise in these situations. So, like Tyler said, yeah, you can cut and run if a dungeon experience is going really poorly, but you might come back in town and two guys are now like afflicted with cowardice, and they're really scared, or they lost their confidence, and so there's always a back door, and we're not just trying to make like a interactive torture simulator for players, but we do want to make a good healthy fun challenge, so that when you do succeed and you do well and you put together a great party and you manage the monsters that you fight really well and you capitalize, that feels genuinely good. Like, I think that's the the goal of this game is to provide the tough love, so that when Dad finally pats you on the back, you feel good.
I just don't know what to say about that.
Some huge dad at the end of the game confirmed, right?
Was that too much with the
Yeah.
dad thing?
End boss is one gigantic dad.
It's just my dad. Like, it's just a picture of my dad. I'm like, am I good enough for you now?
Yeah.
The huge dad.
Yeah.
I've been through
Sounds
every
like my
region.
kinda
I've
game.
defeated every monster.
Yeah.
And yet still you don't approve.
I went to university.
I
So
like it.
what's the deal? So the secret of art is just fuck lighting, just use this weird turquoise color and just paint shit, huh?
For the rim light?
Yeah, I just, it always amazes me when I look at stuff. It's like, well, that's not that hard. You just gotta pick the right color, and it's like, okay, it's actually that hard.
Well, that's the hard thing. Yeah, like here's an interesting thought. Like rim light right now is uniformly bright across the entire character, and that's not maybe being as effective as it could at directing the eye. Everything should be about how well the eye is being directed. So I'm gonna grab some of this darker color here, and then work that rim light down. The thing that I always try to use as a metric is if the painting looks like what it is, even without the line art. Then I know that I've done a good job. Even though it's crude and crass, if you zoom way out, it should still kind of remind you of what it's meant to be. Like down
Oh
here.
man, sounds like Vicious Koi wants to play in easy mode.
Yeah, I actually, he's doing exactly what I hope people would do.
It should be two-man merchant team.
Oh, easy mode. Well, in the Darkest Dungeon thing, that's what we talk about a lot. It's like the big red button that someone says don't push it, right?
Yeah.
And by making it available from the beginning, we obviously want you to push it.
The first thing I want people to do is take their very first party and go straight into the Darkest Dungeon.
Yeah.
Just like, just because it's there, right? It'll be like impossible to sort of ignore.
Yeah.
But we don't want to talk about endgame or anything just yet, but
Oh, okay. We can't talk, but can we talk about Resolve or no?
yeah, for sure.
So we have a really critical stat called Resolve, which is basically it's your veteran status, put into a stat. It's the difference between somebody fresh out of boot camp, great shot, qualified in marksmanship, great great conditioning, and then just freaks out at the first bullet that's flying over their head. So characters, as they complete quests, they raise in resolve, and this makes them more resistant to stress as they go into fighting bigger and badder monsters. And so just imagine taking a bunch of guys with absolutely lowest resolve and sending them right into the hardest dungeon. It's going to be nasty, but very entertaining.
Yeah, I think that's like, I mentioned we don't have levels. That isn't to say we don't have character progression, and I think that really touches on our sort of key character progression stat. And the cool thing about it is that every time a character completes a dungeon run, they're just that much better at handling the stress the next time out. So it's not like a level in a normal game where nothing matters until you pop to the next level. Here, every time you successfully get through a dungeon, that character essentially learns from the experience and is better equipped to handle it next time. And I don't know, I'm pretty excited about that. I think that's just a cool departure from the norm and a little bit more in keeping with, I don't want to say realism because there's nothing realistic about our game, but realistic. So I don't know. It's we've gone a little long. Is there any more? Like, I'm happy to keep going for a little bit. I don't know. Like I said, Kepa, you might know better about how they run this thing or how strict they are. But
They're pretty mellow about it.
yeah, if there's any more questions, I mean, I'm happy to do it for another 15 or 20. I don't know, Tyler, how you feel?
Oh, I'm good. Yeah, I think people are getting to the exciting part of seeing the colors all coming in and
I'm actually getting work done. Like, I need to do this, so.
Nice. Way to multitask.
I know.
Well, we figured at first we were going to just have me noodling on a spreadsheet, but then we decided him drawing would be cooler.
Could have done a split screen. That would have been cool.
Oh my god, can you imagine?
Hey guys, don't worry about it. I'm just changing some numbers here.
Look at all those numbers.
Variables, bitches.
So what? Someone asked earlier about like color palette. Like what made you choose? Like here, I mean, I'm seeing this as you're going because you didn't, but you're doing red
I
and
didn't
gold.
talk to you at all about it or clear it with you. Yep.
Yeah. Um, it's like I'm drawing the Jester, so come and chat about all the things the Jester does. But like, what's making you choose red and gold here and gray?
um, well, I want, like I kind of mentioned earlier, this. Oops, this is not working the way I want it to. This top area is the most important part of this guy. So I want that to pop off the screen, and his legs less so. I think I might give him bells on his toes in the sprite, but I don't have to worry about that right now. So that's why I wanted most of the saturation and kind of punchy stuff up top. Once the stream catches up. Then the other thing is, I thought it would be cool if, like, in my head, he's maybe like an adventurer or kind of, yeah, like in my mind, this guy is like an adventurer who kind of maybe adopted this identity by kind of stumbling on this garb or whatever, and it gave fear and horror in his enemy's minds, so he stuck with it. So I want to dirty it up a little bit here in a little while. I can do a little bit of that right now just for the hell of it. So I wanted to make, like he's got this stuff that used to be quite nice or regal or whatever, fit for the court, but it's all kind of messed up now. And
It'd be interesting to work with our either steward or the power up guys. And when he breaks out the loot, like your idea of him being this sort of happens upon this, and maybe who knows what he started life as, right? A baker or just a street urchin. But it'd be kind of neat if when he plays his songs, it's just this totally mistuned loot, and maybe he doesn't even have that much musical talent.
Yeah, so, that's kind of awesome.
So when you select the skill, it's just like bling bling bling, and it just sounds like a horrible tune,
just like
but it's still
lackadaisically hits the thing like a crazy homeless person with a stringless guitar.
Yeah, the forlorn Jester.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. I think it'd be cool too if he was always sort of barking like like not really laughing, but just like he's just so detached from what's going on.
Oh, that's a good question on the classes. Let me see if I can look at my classes. I've got this giant class list where we add to things, and I don't know. We've had more. I don't want to say more. Well, I guess more hits than misses in the sense, but one thing I'd say is as we've identified classes early versus later, they've evolved, and this Jester is the perfect example of that, of where a bard, and then sure, and lots of games have referenced bards, and a bard certainly fits to some degree in the world, but this fits better, and we're getting better as we go about picking things that fit, if that makes any sense. I mean, like when we did the leper, that was just like where we were. It almost like that's where it gelled for me, and that wasn't even that long ago.
I agree. Because it started I mentioned it just before you got on, but that one started just with just the straight up idea, and then we grew mechanics out of it, and then it kind of was like the bounty hunter was almost like the prequel, and then the leper was like, okay, yeah, this is how we should work.
And I think mechanical reasons. I'm still answering Thexantar's question, but mechanically, I feel like we still have enough flexibility that we can make anything fit. Just between the kind of skills we can think of in combat and camping, and then any town benefits or other benefits. So I don't feel like we've been mechanically limited yet. I mean, the Houndmaster is a great example of something that could have been very mechanically limiting, but by making the call that, look, it's him plus his hound, and we're not going to simulate a pet, and we're not going to have this whole separate thing. It's just his attacks are, the hound leaps out, and his camping skills are the hound's watch and things like that. That's one, we've been able to mechanically make it fit. So we haven't been limited there. I think aesthetically, it's just we've backburnered a few classes that just weren't maybe that original.
Yeah.
Not that everything we.
Yeah, they're just not that punchy, I think to carry on from your thought, if I can understand, if I have a good idea where you're going, but we don't think that everything we're doing is going to just totally hit it out of the park every time, or that we have some dialed into great ideas nonstop. But now that we have enough characters to cross-reference with, I feel like we are in a much better position to vet the ideas. And so for me, it's like I'm finding that I'm asking myself, is that idea you just had on the bus, is that cooler than the leper? Is it as cool? You know, does it fit with kind of the rest of the stuff you've drawn? And the more we have done, the easier that process kind of gets.
Yeah, one example where maybe, and it's nice to have a little bit of variation too, because if every class is, I used to play a lot of like Warhammer 40K and stuff like that. We had this term called Disneyland, which was, you know, every time they'd come out with a new army book, or it was always the coolest and had the best powers and seemed OP at the time. And we would just always, and our sort of term for whoever was using the newest crazy bells and whistles with all the craziness that breaks the game was Disneyland. And if every class is Disneyland, then that also is a little weird. So we've got classes like the Man-at-Arms. You know, he's maybe not the most original, and well, he's not the most original. He's not the most explicitly interesting, but you know, sometimes you need a little bit of like that palate cleanser, and he's going to be good at what he does, and he's going to look a little bit the traditional part, and but he's not mind blowing like the leper or the jester.
Yeah,
and I think that's okay too.
The Crusader and the Vestal are in the same category. Like there are little tweaks on the expected kind of tropes, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, you need a little bit of lemon water to rinse your fingers off with, you know. I think as long as we get the balance, I'm echoing, I think, in your speakers, Tyler, but as long as we get the balance sort of, you know, 65-35 in favor of ideas like the Leper and the Bounty Hunter and the Jester and, you know, some of our more our favorite kind of guys, I think we're in a good spot.
I will say that the fan reactions are really important. So, I mean, everybody watching this channel, our backers, it's been really helpful to see what people like too. I mean, obviously we've got a creative vision for the game, but it's very reinforcing when people respond to some of the things, and we can kind of get a feel for, you know, if we're on the right track in terms of what appeals to people.
Yeah, I mean, we worked on the game for so long in such a vacuum that for me anyway, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but for me, bringing it out and showing people and having like a good response and having people engaged in what we're doing is, I don't know, it's probably been the most, to me, I don't want to get all sappy, but it's been a very profound creative experience for me to go through that and have that validation that, you know, because there was a lot of self-doubt, especially I think for me personally in November when we were just grinding away and it's pouring rain in Vancouver, and is this cool? Are people even going to want it? So finding an audience was great, and hearing that they like what we're doing was really great, and you know, that feedback, positive or negative, you know, like, that guy doesn't really quite do it for me, is something that I'm definitely very interested in hearing.
You've been working on the game for 9 months, right? Longer?
Yeah, since about, I mean, Tyler and I did an application, well, doesn't matter, we started working in about May,
okay.
The two of us. We had been talking about it for a couple of years. We just hook up and talk about game ideas and graphic novel ideas because we always wanted to do something together. But it was never the right time, and then we'd sort of talk about an idea once and be like, yeah, that was pretty cool. And then never really revisit it, and then we kind of hit on this, and every time we'd hook up, it would just drift back to this. It was really kind of organic, and then finally things lined up in our lives, and we just sort of we said, do you want to meet up at this bar, Beercraft, and make a plan? And he's like, yeah, sounds good. So we met there and we're like, are we gonna do it? Yeah, we're gonna do it. And then we just got really, really drunk, and that was sort of the kickoff for Darkest Dungeon.
Was that the kickoff?
I think that was when we promised each other, like 6 drinks in, that we got each other's backs, man, and it was ridiculous. But I think it was a cool thing to do. I wouldn't take it back. I wouldn't change it.
It's pretty much textbook what'll happen if you take your character and put him in the tavern to drink. I mean, they're going to come out of it with a lot of stress reduced, but they may have some other problems, like a lot less money and inebriated. But yeah, then so in May, what we did is we brought on Kelvin, and which is one of our programmers, and we started working on it. And Chris and I had brainstormed a lot on the game for actually about 2 years, just periodically. And so we've been basically full-time, not basically, we've been full-time on it since May, not counting a vacation or two on my side, which They still hold over my head. But working on it, and so we really invested a lot in it before even bringing it to Kickstarter. And that's not a Kickstarter sales pitch. That's just kind of, we realized we're going to do it, and there's a lot of moving parts that we had to figure out, but we just started, doing it. So.
Yeah, and again, it's not a sales pitch at all, but I felt like it was really important. There's so many projects on Kickstarter now, and I just felt it was important to demonstrate to potential backers that, we took it so seriously that, we really sunk our own time and money into it and wanted to bring something presentable and fleshed out to the table, as opposed to just like me and Tyler got drunk and had a really cool idea, and now we're sort of looking for money. I think we wanted to demonstrate how seriously we were taking it and how committed we were to the idea. And you can see I got a little bit of a noise layer here, which I like to do on all the DD art. It's just kind of this scratchy papyrus kind of texture. I just like getting that little extra bit of grit in there, and it also has a slightly warm hue, so it unifies the color palette just a little bit. Speaking of which, I think I'm just going to mess with the colors a little.
Oh, sliders. I can do that.
Yeah, this is some Tyler level stuff right here. Curve.
You had the woodcuts in the background already. Does that help you as well? Like, does that help you feel it as you're drawing it, or is that mainly for our benefit?
The woodcuts in the background?
Yeah, well, like your little slashes of white or whatever it is.
Oh yeah, yeah. I want it to feel really loose. I mean, part of that is a production thing. Like, I want to set the expectation that the art is going to be loose because there's a lot of it to do and there's only one of me. But I also, again, it just kind of makes it feel old and worn and gritty. Without being like the traditional cheesy kind of gritty. I think worn is a better term. I want it because the characters get worn down. That's thematically where our game goes, so I want that to come through in the art. That's the same reason I'm doing all these images on black with like big strong single source lighting, because I want them coming out of the dark or getting swallowed by the dark, and because darkness is a pretty important mechanic in the game. I'm trying to tell as much about the gameplay as I can, layered into the image.
I know. I think everybody's gonna. In the image itself. Yeah, I was gonna say everyone who came just to see you draw is like, I wish they'd shut up about the gameplay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and I use like a lot of these chalky brushes for the coloring again, because I don't want to be precise. Like, here, let me turn off the thing. So that's starting. From back here, you can kind of read, once the stream catches up, you can kind of read the form and the intent of what I'm trying to do. But I don't want it to be super specific. I'm trying to train myself out of this straight up digital painting. And then when the game is done, if we don't make any money, I'll go back to digital painting and have to relearn all of those skills.
Backup plan.
Yeah.
Hey, the stream isn't slow for the people watching. It's just for the people on Skype.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, that's good to know.
It's like the theory of relativity, man. We're in a totally different time than
I know.
else.
I was trying to get this thing set up. It was driving me crazy. Looking at.
So, Chris, a few people I've seen have asked before, like, is this your style? Is this the style you were put on God's green earth to do, or is this, how would you describe, I guess, the DD thing?
Well, I talked a bit about it at the very beginning, but yeah, like I've been an art director for a long time, and this is the style for this game. I mean, if you look at my DeviantArt account, I've drawn a lot of different stuff, like cheesecake pinup stuff, straight up concept art, with all those loose, crazy brushes, illustration work for like Privateer Press and 40K books like that. So really rendered stuff. I wanted to do something that I felt was like fun for this game, that it was fast to execute on, so that I wouldn't get bored or bogged down. And quite honestly, I needed to develop an art style not only that suited the game, but that I could objectify. I need to be able to look at something that I did as an art director, not as the guy who did it, and be able to say, you know what, it's not your best work, but it's consistent, and you're out of time. And I think that's, maybe something that gets overlooked by maybe some less experienced artists attempting the same thing, is that if you just set out to do the best thing you can in every case, you're never going to get done. Like, that's not production viable if you're the only artist. You need to be able to have an objective measuring stick to tell you that the art is, for all intents and purposes, is complete, and stop fussing over it. Because as artists, our tendency is to just keep noodling and noodling and noodling, and it's never good enough. No matter what people say, like it doesn't matter what anybody says. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. So this is the style for the game that came from those set of influences that I talked about at the beginning of the stream. It was developed for this game, and I can draw a different way. I can draw a different way if you guys want. But yeah, I guess that's really all that can be said.
That's cool.
7:30. We should probably call it. 120 people. Oh my god.
Yeah, been pretty consistent too.
Wow. Well, yeah.
100 to 120.
Jeez. I'm glad I didn't notice that while we were talking, quite frankly.
Get stage fright, start
Seriously.
stuttering.
Yeah. It's kinda...
Well, 120 people heard about the huge dads and the anime girls and whatever other crap will be in the game.
Yeah.
That's right.
So yeah, if there's any more last-minute questions about the game or the art or anything, definitely happy to pick them up.
Cool. You give them about 40 seconds or a minute to see if that...
Yeah, for sure. I'm not in a rush. I just don't want to overstay my welcome or say the same thing 400 times.
I think I'm just mesmerized watching you draw. I don't have time to watch you draw during the day, man. So, this is it.
Scythe is just so shiny.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good point. I should give him a little bit of a rim here. I'll pop that face.
That's cool.
How many
Alts?
max per dungeon trip?
What do you mean, Bear Hug? Wonder if he means party size?
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, you can bring 4 characters at any one time. I'm not sure exactly what he means by alts. I mean, you're going to be juggling characters based on their status, so obviously you'll sometimes have to go to your B or C team to fill things in, or you might actually say, "Oh, my whole A team is they had a pretty rough last mission. I'm going to send them all to do some various types of R&R." And maybe you'll go ahead and grab an all-new team, take them into an easy dungeon to build them up, because there's kind of advantages to be building up at different difficulty levels. And, what the gameplay circumstances will kind of dictate that sometimes.
But yes, 4 is the party size. Like we touched on earlier, it's not really advantageous to run with less, and you can't run with more.
You should put the type on Jester or whatever.
Oh yeah. Shit. Okay, so I think at this point what I would do is, if I take a look at the black and white, there's still a lot of room to polish it up and tidy up some of these edges. Some of the stuff is pretty messy, and it's not quite at the fidelity level of the other images. So again, as an art director, I can tell Chris, the artist, that it's not quite ready to be done yet, and I can measure how far off I am. But I think the colors kind of work, so that's great. I gotta tighten up this loot and make sure that comes through. I'm not happy with this sort of ambiguity around his forearm, his dagger hilt strapping the loot body, so that needs a little bit of work. But colors work, and after a little bit more time on the line art and maybe some last-minute tweaks to the colors, I think we're in good shape. So I will name it the Jester. And there he is. So,
What
yeah.
font is that?
Oh, we bought it from Blambot. Blambot is the best fonts on the internet.
Oh.
They're not cheap, but they're fantastic. So yeah. We're squashing this one, 25% on the horizontal axis. But yeah, I love it. So good. Yeah, so I guess if there's nothing else, thank you guys, really sincerely for joining us and checking out the art and listening to us shoot the shit about the game. We're, like I said at the beginning, we're kickstarting now, so you can go and search for Darkest Dungeon on Kickstarter. And if you aren't backing, then we'd definitely love for you to join us. We're looking good. We've killed a couple stretch goals, and yeah, we're just really excited by the interest level. So swing by and check it out. And we're totally happy to get emails and thoughts and ideas and feedback. So you can shoot us emails at feedback@redhookgames.com, or you can just post in the comments of the Kickstarter. Yeah, thanks Tyler for joining us, and thanks very much to Kepa for just sort of moderating and hanging out. It's great to meet you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, good chat with you, Kepa.
Yeah, so if anybody missed it, I think we'll put this up on YouTube tomorrow, because I've been saving a local file. Booyah! And yeah, thanks again. I'm gonna turn off the stream, but I'll stay in chat if there's any last minute stuff. If I can find the OBS thing.
Rad.
Okay.
You find it yet?
No, it's gone. It's not even in my task manager. I can't stop streaming.
Maybe you haven't been streaming this entire time.
Oh, well.
Everyone in the chat is just screwing with you.
OBS. Okay, there it is. All right. Good night to you all.